Craig Hettlinger, it's so cool to see you. And I was thinking yesterday, aside from my mom and dad, who I had on for one episode, you are somebody who I have known longer than anybody else. We're nearing 350 episodes of this podcast. I've known you longer. I know you probably less than just about anybody, but longer than just about anybody, because we grew up in the same neighborhood back in the hood in Pea Ridge, outside of Barbersville. So welcome to Let's Parent on Purpose. It's good to have you today.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So Craig, I want to jump in. You have a pretty wild life story. And Jesus is all in the middle of it. As you have had a radical turnaround. So let's just kind of start with that and go back and maybe tell a little bit about how you grew up and then kind of the path that you went down, and we'll walk from there.
So I probably ought to verbalize a disclaimer, right? Because I'm not your typical Christian. Like there's a conduit there. I feel like there's got to be a conduit between the people in the church, the leaders of the church, and the people that I deal with in active addiction. And I'm that guy in the middle that says it's okay to talk to those guys. So sometimes my tactics and my techniques are a little less palatable for the people in the church, right? But more so than the people in active addiction, because I have to say it's okay. It's okay. Mm-hmm. So pardon me if my expressions potentially get a little colorful. That's not intended. But I was a 16-year heroin addict. I grew up in Barbersville, and I loved athletics, and I thrived in sports and played soccer for Marshall University. We were a top 21, a top 25 soccer team my freshman and sophomore year, and my freshman year, when we had just beat the number 6 team in the country at home, Akron, we went out and celebrated that night. And when we went out and celebrated, I partook. The rest of my teammates didn't, but I partook in some controlled substances, and I passed out that evening at 19. And when I woke up, I was 32 years old in a homeless shelter in Richmond, Virginia, with a 12-step program. A lot of people lose a lot of things in active addiction: cars, jewelry, homes, a lot of things of value. I lost over a decade. I can't really recall a lot of things from 19 to 32. They sometimes come back to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember that. But for 13 or 14 years, 16 in total, but there was 13 or 14 years until I started to attempt recovery, that life was just miserable, and death seemed like a reasonable option to me. I've been to a number of different treatment centers, and finally, February 27th of 2018, I got clean, and stayed that way. And since that time, I've created 6 businesses. I'm on the Mayor's Council of Drug Control Policy here in Huntington, the epicenter of the epidemic, as it's nationally known. And I'm the sitting chair of 2 nonprofit organizations. So I haven't wasted any time in the last 5.5 or 6 years. Whenever I was playing soccer at Marshall, I remember a guy from Florida. And if you know anything about athletics in general, the talent pool in West Virginia is not near what it is in the talent pool in Florida, right?
Yeah.
Because just of sheer numbers, right?
Yeah, I say that, Craig. Good. Yeah, we have more kids in my county, and I have a small county in Florida. Like, we have 180,000 people in our county. There's more kids in our county that go Division I every year than in the entire state of West Virginia. So there's a big disparity there.
Yeah. So the reason I say that is there was a really highly recruited guy out of Florida that was with me at a bar that's actually right behind my facility now. We were sitting at the front bar, and he said to me, "Craig, why are you doing this?" And to me, it didn't even really register what he was talking about, because I just thought that was what college kids were supposed to do, right? Go out to the bar, have a good time, drink, didn't even think about studying. But to my perception was that was what you're supposed to do. You're a college athlete. You go out and party. He looked at me and said, Craig, why are you doing this all the time? So why are you going out and drinking every night? I didn't realize that I was the only one at every drinking opportunity. Right?
Hmm.
There were other people that showed up occasionally, but I never really recognized that I was the one at every single one of them. And so he went on to say, you're the prototype of an MLS, a Major League Soccer midfielder. Speed, size, talent, ability. Like, this is a guy from Florida that's telling a guy from little Cabell County, West Virginia, that he's the prototype of an MLS midfielder. I never really gave it everything I had at that time to find out if that assessment was accurate. I still don't necessarily believe that that was accurate, but I never gave it the opportunity and the effort to find out if it was true. When I got sober, when I got clean and sober, I made a promise to myself that I was never going to allow somebody to make that argument again. Never going to allow somebody to make the argument that I didn't give everything I had. So I wake up every day. I found my purpose and passion. You know, Stephen Furtick said you don't have to find your purpose and passion; it'll find you.
Hmm.
What I didn't realize, you know, when I first heard that, I thought it sure would have been nice in those 16 years of heroin addiction if my purpose and passion would have found me. Then nothing, there wouldn't be any problem. I would have been just fine. But I didn't realize that I had to be in position in order to be able to receive the blessings that God was going to throw my way. It's like being in right field and the ball getting hit to left field, wondering why it's not coming to you. Well,
Hmm.
why is your blessing going to left field? It's because I'm not in position. I wasn't doing the things necessary to be able to see them, be able to hear them, be able to pursue the path that God had chosen for me. When I got sober, I started to do what was in front of me. I started to do the things, you know. I was thinking on my way here that you know, my entire life I tried to mold and shape my life to make it look like what my friends' lives around me looked like, right? What my parents wanted my life to look like, whether that be an attorney, whether that be a position like my brother. Like, every time I tried to mold and shape my life, like I was building a sandcastle on the beach, like whenever I was trying to mold and shape it to what I thought that everybody else's lives, my life should look like based on the perceptions of everybody else around me, it crumbled every time. But when I got into recovery and I just took my hands off of it, I just said, you know what, God, whatever you put in front of me, whatever you tell me to do, whatever the next step is that you tell me to do, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it well. And since that time, like, things have just materialized. And it's crazy to me that the more I put other people, the more altruistic I am, the more I put other people's needs, wants, and desires in front of my own, invariably my life gets better. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, and I don't have to know the formula. I don't have to know the chemical structure of that process, but I just know it works. So I've continued to do it over 5.5 years, putting my clients and my staff and everybody that I come in contact with in front of me. A guy messaged me last week. He said, so I'm the chair of the Cabell County Recovery Coalition, and we just got about $79,000 awarded to us to put hardwired fire alarms in 5 houses. And they didn't take into consideration, the fire alarm company didn't take into consideration that that the houses needed to be drawn. So I took it upon myself. I said, you know what? I'm going to go, so that we don't accrue any more money on this bill. I'm going to go out and I'm going to draw it myself. My dad's a kitchen designer, so I've got a little bit of skills when it comes to drawing things on graph paper. And so I went out and I drew every single recovery house, all 3 floors of every house with 15 different floor plans, did it myself. And I sent a picture of one of the house to the owner of one of the houses. He said, "Man, I don't know how you're not a billionaire already. I don't know. You do all this stuff." He's like, "I don't know how you're not a billionaire." He's like, "Oh, I know, because you give everything for free away." And I said, you know what? In a sense, yes, in this worldly perspective, it's free. There's not money exchanged. I do it from the kindness of my heart, right? Yes, from your perspective, it's free. But man, I get rewarded tenfold for the things that I do
Hmm.
because I'm so altruistic. Like, it may not come tomorrow, it may not come next week, but I know it's coming, right? And on the other side of that, like, there's a lot of people that don't understand this concept that there's always something coming down the pipe at me. I realize it's the term is actually pike, but I'm a general contractor and pipe is relevant to me. So, there's always something coming down the pipe, and I don't know who's going to be involved. I don't know the situation. I don't know any of that stuff. I just know life isn't all puppy dogs and rainbows. And whenever I brace myself for those unexpected things, and if I'm always prepared, I never have to get prepared. So there's a lot of different things in my disposition that I've learned over the last 5.5 years. I've been taught by some really, really good people and mentored by some of the best businessmen in our area. And the difference between active addiction and now, probably the largest difference is I listen to people rather than think I know what's best for me, right?
So
And being able to implement those things.
I'd like to go back some before your dive into addiction. So we grew up in the same area. And we know a lot of the same people. I mean, we used to play basketball together, and on Mayhood, Mayhood Drive and everything. And your parents still live right across the yard from where I grew up. My first 18 years of my life were there. So I know the area that we lived in, like you had to know people following Jesus. You had to know people of faith. And one of the things about the Bible Belt is there's plenty of fakers, right? Because culturally, everybody's a Christian. Doesn't mean that everybody's a Christian. But there are legitimate examples around. So like because I'm thinking you said now you listen to people. You heard the truth. You had to have encountered the truth at some point. And so I'm curious, first off, like what was your faith background before college? Because and honestly, I'll tell you, like my impression of you, even as an elementary kid, was combative. Like your brother, like nicest disposition in the world, and you 4 or 5 years younger than your brother's friends, trying to pick fights with them when you're like in third grade and they're in middle school. So, like there's a fighter spirit that was there all along. But what was your faith background or beliefs or practice before your fall in college?
So I was introduced to the Methodist Church. I was introduced to the Catholic Church, and it seemed as though the more I was forced to go to, and at that age, the more I was forced to go to these things, the more I rebelled away from it. Just child stuff.
Sure.
And it wasn't until Alcoholics Anonymous and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is largely based on the Book of James and the Bible, that I started to understand that I'm capable. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but this was my conduit, right? This was my introduction to my faith. Is that I can develop my own conception of God to get me started in that direction. See, what I think one of the problems that we have, especially with people in active addiction, is that we try to hit the home run with these people all at once, right? And a lot of these people are just now learning to swing the bat, and if we can get them introduced to something like that 575 page of the big books of Alcoholics Anonymous that was based on the book that you all teach from, that we can teach from, right? If we can get them headed in that direction, we have a lot better chance of capturing some of those people than the people that were trying to hit the home run first and foremost, right? If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And that's what worked for me. I didn't understand the Methodist Church. I didn't understand the Catholic Church. To be completely blunt and honest with you, it was so boring. I couldn't stand it. And I'm a guy that probably most appreciates a non-denominational church that teaches from the Bible and teaches the Word, and I just really enjoy. I'm probably most receptive, as a lot of people are, when the conduit for God and Jesus is through music and my children. And what I mean, my children, is that now that I'm sober, I'm capable of seeing what God is trying to teach me through my kids. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I'm a firm believer, and I say all the time that my 5-year-old has taught me more about life and what God is trying to show me than anybody else in this world. Because
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm dead serious. There's a number of different things that I could describe as like, and that God's taught me through my child is that. So we were in a service one day, and he was about 4 years old, I think. And rather than him being disruptive in the service, I'll hand him my phone and let him watch YouTube silently in the congregation. And I'll turn it sideways like this. And when YouTube is sideways like this, you'll have three options of next videos to play down here at the bottom while the main video is playing up
Mm-hmm.
here. Well, he would slide those videos up like that,
Mm-hmm.
and I would kind of glance over. And with 100% effectiveness, I could look at the options on his phone, and I knew which one he was going to pick. I knew exactly which one of the three he was going to pick, right? And I did that about 5 times, and it hit me. I was so good at picking which one he was going to pick that he put his one time. I'm like, he's going to pick that one, and then I'm like, nope, I changed my mind. He's going to pick this one on the left, and he went like this and moved his hand to the left. It was scary how good it was, and it hit me, right? It hit me. I thought to myself, that's how God and Jesus do in my life, right? They know exactly what I'm going to do, when I'm going to do it. My Father knows exactly what I'm going to do, when I'm going to do it, before I even do it. And it's just like all these things that He's taught me just by His actions, and I'm like, man, I'm sitting here in church when this happens, and I get it. And it's a guy that wasn't, I mean, I was a believer because I was forced to be. And like all these things that my 5-year-old's taught me is just unbelievable because I'm capable of seeing it. It's another description of being in position to receive the blessings, right?
Mm-hmm.
Being able to understand the things and follow the things that God tells me. I never believed before that God spoke to people but He absolutely does, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just, it's the conduit. And it's like, whenever I was growing up, I was on scholarship to play soccer at Marshall University. I've landed 6-figure jobs. I've had some success even in my active addiction. And my father, to my recollection, my father's a good man. He's a hard worker. It's probably where I get my work ethic. But he never told me he was proud of me, and he
Mm.
never told me he loved me. Never. I can't recall one time that he
Wow.
ever said those two things to me. Well, I got in the middle of developing my very first building over here. I would get to work at about 6 o'clock in the morning, and I wouldn't leave until midnight or 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock the next morning. Like it was normal for me to spend 16, 18 hours in that building working by myself. Well, I got home early one morning, and there was an article from the Herald Dispatch that was sitting on my bed, and encircled was in that article was the quote by Theodore Roosevelt, "The man in the arena." Man in the arena. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about,
Mm-hmm.
and it's talking about doing it regardless of failure or success, right? Giving the effort. And that was circled. And as I read that, man, like I just started crying because I realized my dad at the first identifiable time had told me he was proud of me and he loved me.
Mm.
To continue to do, he had seen the persistence that I was demonstrating. He knew there wasn't anything stopping me. And I also realized that my dad had always loved me and was always proud of me. I just didn't know how to receive it. I wasn't in
Mm.
position, right? Like I didn't have the clear mind. I didn't have the things I needed necessary to be able to comprehend how he was saying it. Not everybody's love looks the same. And I realized that the love for my father, I wasn't capable of seeing that. So there's a lot of interesting realizations.
Yeah. So as you now are in your addiction, you said 16 years, I think. And I believe you said you went through a number of different treatment programs during that time, and none of them seemed to stick. So I'm curious, what was the difference between all of those other times, and when you finally got sober and clean, was it the program? Was it you? Was it a combination? Like, what was it that ultimately led to freedom?
I'm a firm believer that every time you walk into a treatment program, regardless of desire to get clean or not, every time you walk in, you have a fractionally better chance each time you go in because, there's a quote on that I saw somewhere that millionaires on average fail their first four business ventures before they become successful. So by extension, failure is fundamental in success, right? By that scenario,
Mm-hmm.
if they would have quit on the first, second, or third time, they never would have become millionaires come the fourth go around. So persistence, right? That's one of the things that I have to keep trying because I kept trying is why I succeeded. Um, I can't really blame it on the programs because I believe anybody can recover. You can put me in the middle of Compton. You can put me in the middle of Compton and I can get sober,
Mm.
provided that I have the willingness and desire to do so. I don't know how serious I was the first 5 times of going into these treatment programs, but I had to go into those programs to end up becoming serious because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was tired of disappointing people and not amounting to anything. I thought to myself, how can somebody have so much potential? Um, a guy told me one time, you've got potential. And he went on to say that's an indictment, right? Potential, you have potential as an indictment because you could do something, but you haven't. And it made a whole lot of sense to me. But these programs, they all do a very, very good job. And a lot of them, kind of teach the same things and from the same dispositions. And I just had to have the average is, I believe, 5.8. 5.8 times somebody goes into a treatment program on average, that's when
Whoa.
they get sober, right? Apparently I'm an underachiever because it took me 6 or 7, but I got it nonetheless. And I just feel like the difference for me, and I stay a lot, Recovery Point it was the healing place here in Huntington prior to becoming Recovery Point. That's one of the ones I went to before my last treatment center. And I say all the time that Recovery Point taught me how to live and the Lifehouse taught me how to worship.
Mm.
And I feel like when I had those two elements, how to live, how to worship, coupled and armed with the facts about myself, having those two weapons in my hand, how to live and how to worship, I think that's what made the biggest difference.
Huh. There's a book that I found really powerful and helpful. I think it's called The Freedom Fight. It's by Ted Schimmer, and it's actually about overcoming pornography addiction. But one of the things that he talks about in there is that, like, you don't overcome pornography addiction by concentrating on overcoming pornography addiction. There has to be a more
Amen.
compelling thing in your life, and if you have something more compelling, then you can move on. And he talks about, even with opiates, all kinds of people take opiates. I mean, there's like, I've taken opiates. I've had, herniations of discs in my back, and I've had, a couple catastrophic ones. I've had a hernia surgery and they gave me fentanyl. I'm like, this is I hate this stuff. I think it
Yeah.
was fentanyl. It was Dilaudid. What? Yeah, it wasn't fentanyl. But because, at the points of my life where I'm given this stuff, like, okay, I have a reason that I want to take it, but I have a much more compelling reason to not want to be on this stuff.
Amen.
That's what pulls you out. And I think that somehow, it's the same with pornography and addiction is addiction. When it comes down to it, at some point, addiction, from my vantage point, addiction is not the primary problem. Addiction is a
No.
symptom of a deeper
Symptom.
problem. And, that one of those, like, not seeing who you are in the Lord. You mentioned that father wound, man, that goes, whether it's real or perceived, like, if I perceive the father wound, I'm living the father wound. But if you can see yourself beyond where you are, if you can see yourself as God sees you, I think even like back to that whole, we are made in the image of God, which means that we are like, I'm learning more about this all the time. We are God's representatives on earth. That's a big part of what made in the image means. When you look at every other religion in the world, the idols and statues they make, that's the image of God on, their gods on this earth. And yet Genesis tells us there are no idols. There are no statues that are appropriate. He made us as his image on this earth. And so we are to reflect the glory of God, whether you're a plumber or a pastor or anything in between. And I think if you have a compelling vision of who God wants you to be, then that's a greater force than that addictive substance. And I think that, at least from my vantage point, why do people fall? Why do people relapse? Because they can't believe the truth about themselves. And that's a huge part of it. And like, how do you make somebody believe the truth about themselves? I think that's part of one of those supernatural miracle of God things where like God, whether somebody acknowledges God's in it or not, like God has to be in it, because a change of belief is much harder than a change of behavior. And if you change your belief, the behaviors, they can come. You got habits to work through, but they can come. And it sounds like somewhere along 5.8 times, or 6.2 times, you started to believe something different about yourself.
Yes. Yeah, you're 100% right that there has to be an opposing force that is stronger than the force and desire and benefits, because we've got a built-in forgetter. Like I've got a built-in forgetter in my mind. I forget about the pain and the misery that drugs and alcohol caused me, and I'm really quick to remember those fractional good feelings and good times that it gives me, even though the bad times seriously outweigh the little good times. And that's why I continue to go back. If I've got that opposing force, if I'm building that, focused on building a life, following God's will and doing the things necessary to stay permanent and long term sobriety, then those, it's like I talk about it in my book, is like active addiction is like a hallway, with a bunch of doors on each side, and as I pursue down this hallway, any time, somebody can jump out in that hallway, either distract me, pull me into the door. But when I found my purpose and passion, it's just me and the door at the very end of the hallway. When I find my purpose and passion and I start to build a life that's worth living, all those doors disappear on the sides of the hallway. It's just me and my destination and my desires, to get where I say I want to go. And those doors on the sides are no longer relevant because my purpose and passion have found me. But it's about being in position, and doing the thing doing the things God wants me to do, to build that life. And one of my mentors, Rocky Meadows, talks about one of the dilemmas that we face. Does God want me to turn left? Does God want me to turn right? I don't. God, which way do you want me to turn? And he always talks about God doesn't care which way you turn. God just wants you to take him with you. And it makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
It makes a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I tell kids all the time, because I'm walking with students who are trying to figure out what to do with their life, where to go to college, and some of them are serious about discerning the will of God. And I just say, look, seek the Lord on it, ask the Lord on it, but also don't freak out if you don't have a clear answer. I mean, God spoke through a donkey. He spoke through a burning bush. He's spoke through clouds in heaven, and he's spoken through people. God has infinite ways to get your attention and guide you. And I don't think that you're going to accidentally dishonor God by trying in the sincerity of your heart to walk a path that you think God wants you to walk. Now, it may not work out, but that doesn't mean that God wasn't in it. And because like we talked about, failure is a huge part of growth. And so there's things that I've attempted for the Lord that I know are very good things that just fell completely flat. And, so I can say in one sense, well, it wasn't the will of the Lord for that thing to happen, but it doesn't mean that I was out of God's will for attempting to walk that. It just means that it didn't work out. Sometimes it's a physical health thing. Sometimes it's a finance. Sometimes the opportunities don't happen, but the Lord cares about our character a whole lot more than our success on a material level. And so, I can praise Jesus when everything's going well, but like, can I walk close with the Lord when I fall flat, when I'm embarrassed because
Yeah.
I was trying something for God that didn't work out? And it's like, do I care more about what other people think about me, or the fact that Jesus is still with me? And so, yeah, I love that. You mentioned your book, and before we close out, I would love for you to share about that, because that's a big accomplishment, writing and actually getting it out and published. And it's, as this interview comes out, you'll be a couple weeks into it. So tell me about the book that you've written. What's it about and who's it for?
So it's for really anybody, because everybody knows somebody that struggles with active addiction if they don't do so themselves. Everybody has one family member that this could bring some enlightenment to, right? Like some understanding, and that's the main goal. I don't care what it does for me personally. I just, the only thing I've ever wanted to do for the last 6 years is improve the quality of somebody's life, and if I can help change one life with this book, then my I can deem it as a success. It's called "That Ain't No Mountain for a Climber." Um, and I talk about a lot of stuff that I went through. I talk about some of my character defects. I talk about some of my shortcomings. I talk about some of my difficulties, and how I dug myself out of that hole. I'm not perfect. I make that blatantly obvious in this book. I fall short of the glory of God on a daily basis. It might be a little edgy, in terms of a tiny bit of language, but as I've discussed before, like, my clients don't respond to the image of perfection. They don't. They're coming straight out of the streets or straight out of an active addiction, and there has to be something. Like my brother, for example, if the doctor, if he were to come in here and teach the exact same things that I teach, nobody would listen to him.
Yeah.
Nobody would really listen to him. They don't believe he's got a frame of reference. And that reminds me, I sometimes will take some of my clients to appointments or take them to responsibilities outside of the facility. And up until January or February of this year, I had a breathalyzer in my car. I had a blow and go in my car. And when they would get in the car, after the initial laughter that the CEO of the company has a breathalyzer in his car, because I had it for 4 or 5 years. And after the initial laughter, it probably amplified a message that I tell them frequently. I've been there too. I understand what it's like. I'm not this guy that thinks he's perfect and does everything. In fact, I'm very quick to talk about my faults, because I think that makes me more relatable to the people inside my program, in recovery in general. And that's kind of the tone that I take with this book. I have a child that I don't get to see, that lives a few hours away. And that transpired when I was sober because of my desire to succeed. I thought that, I thought success was only defined by somebody's ability to navigate business and commerce. I had no idea. I had no idea that success in life had to do with your relationship with God. I had no idea that your success in life was also defined by your relationship with your family and the things you do with your family. I only thought it was commerce and your ability to navigate business. That was my perception.
Wow.
And I sacrificed a lot of things in creating what I've created over the last 5 years, mainly the relationship with my youngest son. My youngest son wasn't planned. I thought that it couldn't happen. And I expressed that I didn't want to have another child, because I knew there wasn't anything stopping me from building what I said I was building, and I was in the middle of building. And now I look back on it and I question, and I talk about it in the book, like, was it worth it? Was it worth it? I'm hoping that changes soon, but I go into a little more detail in this, and like I'm not, like, I've made mistakes, right? I've made mistakes in sober. Like, what is my excuse? Like, I can't blame it on drugs now. And I evaluate some things in my life, and that's something that I do all the time. I always evaluate my daily processes. I always evaluate the people I surround myself with. And you were talking about earlier about you have to build something. You have to build a life that has a stronger gravitational pull than the drugs and the addiction
Mm-hmm.
and the memories of the good times. And I also have to develop a network of people, right? The network of people is one of the largest things that want this thing, sobriety, equal to or more than I do. And I talk about some of the network building lessons that I have in here. I talk about building a network of people. There's some really neat stuff. There's some funny stuff. There's some really sad stuff, and it's all the emotions. And I'm excited for it, nervous mostly, because it's like you're explaining all your character defects and
Yeah.
shortcomings and letting America read it.
Yeah.
But I just hope it helps one person.
Yeah. But that ain't no mountain for a climber. It's on Amazon, I'm assuming, because everything's on Amazon.
Not Not yet.
Not yet.
I did all of it's going to be on hawkrecovery.com.
Okay.
HAWC recovery.com. That is my website. I haven't gotten to the point where it's going to be on Amazon yet, but it's a really easy
Okay.
transaction on hawkrecovery.com, and we'll send it right to you. I
Sure
did
thing. And we'll put
everything
that.
my own. I wanted to keep. Go ahead.
Yeah, we'll put that in the show notes for everybody. So if you're driving along or whatever,
Okay.
just check out and you can go to that link. So, hey man, I appreciate your time. It's really encouraging to hear. And I know for everybody, I feel like everybody at this point, like you said, has somebody, whether it's a sibling, a cousin, a brother, there's somebody in your family in the grip of addiction. And so hearing a story on the other side of that, man, it's just like hearing, if you have cancer, hearing survivor stories of cancer is so encouraging for you. If your child has cancer, knowing that other children have made it out is so encouraging. And I think hearing the
Amen.
deliverance of somebody 16 years in, so like somebody listening to this that has, more than a decade in of this despair as a parent, as a sibling, as a loved one, to not lose hope that God is not done with their kids yet. I appreciate you being on and wish you the very best. And thank
Thank
you.
you.
And thank you for investing in our hometown of helping bring hope in that place. So really appreciate your time today, Craig.
Thank you for having me, James. It was a pleasure.